Good afternoon. Welcome to Building Boston and Beyond. Building Boston and Beyond is a show that will share all the construction projects and innovative ideas and revitalization efforts in Boston that are underway. Obviously, this is very important, I believe, to neighborhoods and surrounding cities to know what's going on with regard to construction, with regard to transportation projects. With that said, I would like to share, today we're having a special guest from the MBTA General Manager Beverly Scott. She is the General Manager for the past 2 years, and she is formerly from Atlanta. She ran that system there, and she's with us here today to share what's going on at the MBTA. Obviously, there are a number of projects going on. There's the Green Line extension, there's the Longfellow Bridge, there's projects that improve quality of life improvements for customers, such as the Cape Flyer, water transportation, and late night service. With that said, welcome Beverly Scott.
Lydia, thank you so much. It's absolutely a pleasure to be here and to be able to reconnect with you after so many years. So they said, you're going on Lydia's show. I said, oh my goodness. So no, it's really very, very, very exciting times at the MBTA, at MassDOT, and really within the overall Boston region, but also the Commonwealth. Mm-hmm. So so we say over on our end that at this point in time, kind of our projects have projects, but there's still so much work that needs to be done. So, but we're very excited. Excellent.
So I know when I was speaking to your staff earlier, we were talking about topics. I know you have the passion about education
Absolutely.
With youth and just even driving them towards a transportation career, which is so very important, and obviously I have the passion for that too, working in transportation for many years. You have this program now, a collaboration with some schools.
Well, we're working, so let me, as we were talking, as we were getting ready to get revved up, just, I guess, kind of a profile that I bring as a general manager, and it has been, my God, it's been 35 years, and came here from Atlanta, but I always laugh and say 9 systems through those years. So what I often say to people is that I am absolutely intrigued by we're big things that move, we're bricks, we're mortar, we're every kind of bolt and nut and all of that. But at the end of the day, what is really important about transportation and the work that we do is the difference that we make in communities and the difference that we make for people, okay? So what I have been honored to be able to do for all these years, as I say, is actually being in the business of community and future building, okay? Mm-hmm. I know that for a fact, we did not really appreciate that as much, say, even 20 years ago. It used to be that when you went to be a general manager, almost the sum total of whether or not people thought you'd done an effective job was whether or not you got the buses or whatever modes you had. Buses, trains, water, you got it out and you got it back in the house. That is still, that is absolutely the heart of the business and the ground we occupy. So we better make sure that service runs very effectively. But honestly, the it is not just the transportation, it's what having the mobility and access permits us to do. So that, I guess I will just say, kind of underscoring when you started out, what's so important about this. It isn't just that we went and did nuts and bolts and bridges. It's that it's economic competitiveness, it's jobs creation, it's healthy lifestyles, it's healthy communities, it's sustainability, it's energy independence. And the choices that we make are absolutely relative to transportation, and the infrastructure are absolutely critical to that, okay? So having said that, so then I give you this other little takeoff. A long time ago, I didn't make it up. I started out younger woman. I was younger then. I used to, everybody always talks about, well, I did this with how's the health of your organization? And so we'll start talking about the bridges, or we'll talk about how old the rail cars are and all that. And all of that is to simply come back to what's absolutely critical is we need to look at that, but also what about the people?
Yeah.
Okay. What about the workforce? At the end of the day, it's the people who are fundamental to the product. And so what I have had an absolute passion around, which has not always been comfortable for our industry because we are so physically things driven, is the focus on the human side of it. What's the workforce? Who are the people? what are the skills, what are the competencies, what's the profile of that workforce, and quite candidly, how healthy is that workforce? How are we, and I tell you the honest to God's truth, this is across transportation. I've been largely, as you know, transit for the majority, so it's primarily been the trains, the buses, water, whatever. We wound up nationally doing a lot of work in this area, probably starting about 12, 13 years ago. And the terrible thing, and this is, I tell you the honest to God's truth, we had the National Academy of Science looking at the whole thing, critical workforce. Yeah. They went out and they did surveying and working. And they came back and they told a whole bunch of us, they said, well, let us tell you the good news. The good news is that it's not that young people feel badly about you, because you really don't have a bad image. I tell you what they told us. They said you really don't have much of an image at all. Yeah. That for the most part, young people, when they are framing their decisions and their thoughts about where they want, what kind of careers they want, where they want to go in life, that for the most part, they really do not have a picture at all about what is the fullness, the depth, and the breadth of the transportation sector. So the point for us is that it's the truth. Is that and you know what I thought to myself? I said, oh my God. I've oftentimes laughed and said, love me or hate me, but feel strongly about me. So when they came back and they said, guess what, guys? You're just like this hidden jewel. Okay, so fast forward, the whole area of workforce, I don't even like to say human capital, but while we're looking at infrastructure and the physical part of it, every one of our organizations has to be equally focused in terms of where are the people, what's happening, how people are retiring at droves. And I mean, particularly when you look at a system, and I don't need to tell you of the complexity of the MBTA, which I will tell you pound for pound, work New York 6 years, take nothing from it. But when you look at pound for pound, the MBTA is quite candidly the most complex transit system in the United States. We have every single one of the modes. New York doesn't have water. Water is in New York. It's not run by the MTA, okay? So when you look at it, you've got everything right here, including, we're 100+ years old, okay? So we have everything from the latest in technology that's over here and continuing to move to, I tell people, there are things that happen in this system, I defy you, go down, there is no as-built drawing, okay? Point of that being, if there were ever a place where ensuring that we are placing absolute emphasis, not just on both the people that currently work in the system, but also how are we in fact going to make sure that we're constantly priming that pump and that we're really planning for succession is absolutely critical. And we will be being irresponsible on our part if we don't. So big focus in terms of what are the critical, what are the core competencies, what is it that, how do we need to be able to stay and be on top of our game for all of our current employees, but also looking at the pipeline. So what do I mean by that? Today we have 6,200 employees at the T. People ask me, Beverly, what keeps you up at night? We have 6,200 head count at the T. I can tell you today that over 850 some people have the years and the time that they could retire. Now, I'm not trying to say that they're all going to go running out the door tomorrow, but anytime that you have that convergence of events, there's two things. Number one, you're not going to build your next generation off of that profile. And quite candidly, maybe if you're lucky, people might wind up making the decision that they may remain 7 to 10 years once they're at a point that they could really retire. But you need to do something, okay? Now, I'm going to take that fast forward. That's what the demographic, that's what the retirement eligibility is today. When you take those numbers out 5 years, that number goes up to 1,800, and 38% of those individuals are in what we call our specialized maintenance areas. Okay, so they are no different than you'll hear many people in private sector talk about. They are track workers, they're rail controllers, they're signalmen. They're those, once again, many people, when you talk to them, they say, well, what are you all actually talking about there? There's really nothing, think about it. there's really not a whole lot different in terms of what winds up happening in terms of a rail control and a rail control system, or what we call our operations control center, than the same kinds of plagues that have been hitting the aviation industry in terms of next gen and what they have to do in terms of their air traffic controllers. Similar type of whatever. A lot of times we don't make those connections, and then you say to yourself, well, exactly will you tell me what school do you go to go get that degree? Where do you go to get that particular set of specialization? Okay, and you know, if you look at the vertical systems, elevators, escalators, all of these hundreds of millions and thousands of pieces that move, okay, that are required in order to be able to efficiently, safely, and reliably run this system, the same kind of focus and attention that takes place on the bricks, the mortar, the metal, and the steel has to, in a very intentional way, take place relative to our people, making sure that they are the best that they can be and that we're training the next generation. Now, this is something the T can't do by itself, okay? And it's not just a T issue, because quite candidly, and I'm learning things, God, I tell you, if you ever stop learning, you really get stupid, is that unfortunately, in secondary education and even in the education field, and I'm going to make some stereotypes here in people, when we start talking about these specialized areas, that I'm not saying that a college degree is not, or post-college, is not something that you can, we aspirationally want everyone to have, but there is nothing wrong, dirty, or whatever about, if you say the word vocational education, sometimes it's almost like, oh my God, you stigmatize my child and you want them to be in a secondary spot, not thinking about in terms of electronics and what takes place in terms of new technologies and advanced manufacturing, and being at the very best of our game, and looking at what people have done in other countries relative to apprenticeship programs, and really training and developing. It's almost a continuous learning cycle, if you will, that very much marries industry and education infrastructure and winds up making all of those connections. So what we've done, just kind of stepping back, we said, look, one, we're going to be very clear about what is the health, how do we look at the T? So some of the work that we're doing now is to be just say, okay, what are the jobs that we have? What are the core competencies? What's the skill set? The explosion of technology that winds up taking place is absolutely unbelievable. And let's be very clear about where we have gaps now and what we need to do, labor and management, everybody working together to say, what kind of programs do we need to make sure that our folks are the very best they can do, and understanding the fact that we continuously refresh that. At the same time, we need to be very clear about, well, what does that pipeline look like? When does it appear that people are going to be retiring? And then how is it that we're intending to, once again, intentionally wind up being able to ensure that when it gets to, when it's time for people to start retiring, that you're prepared, because you know yourself, many of these positions, you don't just go and say, oh, overnight, I'm getting ready to wind up having top-notch signal maintainers or track personnel or rail controllers. So putting that same kind of planning that we'll put on a capital plan. Years ago, I actually had brought a group over to Harvard, never shall forget it, it's 20-some years ago. And there was the dean of the business school at that point in time. He was saying, he said, you know what? I don't want to hear anybody else start talking to me about a strategic business plan that does not have a human element to it. He said, because you know, that was when everybody was talking about everything was strategic, okay? And he said, quite candidly, unfortunately, you'll see all these strategic this, a strategic capital plan or whatever, and the number of times that you will literally wind up seeing that there has been a focus in terms of what's actually required on the people side of the house in order to be able to execute that, because we don't play the game of disposable people. And if you don't, anything that you're going to be intentional about, it's really got to have a plan. So anyway, so what we have done is you know, we're starting. We've talked with Boston Public School System. Very much, it is our intention to work cooperatively with BPS, And we have a whole lot of partners on this one. I can't say enough about Secretary Matt Malone. He's just been a great partner to say, my secretary has been great. He said, look, go for it, okay? To literally wind up piloting what would wind up being a transportation career gateway program. We're very focused in terms of Madison High School.
Yes, yes.
And we've said, look, we're not trying to go out there and just create something new in terms of Madison High School to say, look, we know that the foundation on all of these infrastructure programs has to be based on a very solid STEM foundation, science, technology, engineering, mathematics. We know that, okay? And really all of these infrastructure areas basically come off of that,
Right.
but to literally wind up putting a career gateway program in place as a pilot that would wind up being across transportation. So, I mean, my partner, so literally, when you start talking this stuff, most of the time people look at you and they say, oh, you know, maybe this woman is just kind of, look kind of yah-yah, okay? You know, she's just talking,
No, it makes sense to me from the outside
and
looking
there
in.
are
Yeah.
programs that we do not have to create the wheel, recreate
No,
the
you
wheel,
don't.
okay? And there's some programs that are already in existence. The best one that I'm aware of, and I want to thank them publicly, Cardozo High School in Washington, D.C. has been, and literally most of that curriculum was funded by the U.S. Department of Transportation. Actually, at the point in time that Rodney Slater was FHWA director before he became Secretary of Transportation. Cardozo High School, which is an inner city school, so we're not talking about, you don't have to wind up being the 4.0 in order.
Right.
Cardozo, and at this stage, 85% of their kids do go on to college, okay? But Cardozo High School, when I was actually going to school in the district 35, 40 years ago, Cardozo High School was as urban as you could even begin to talk about, okay? Cardozo High School has had for 20 years now a transportation program. They have been unbelievable,
That's
okay?
amazing.
Every single, they not only do the rail and transit side of the house, and of course they've had our counterparts down in the Washington, D.C. area, Washington Metro. They've had relationships with them for years and years and years. Cardozo High School is not just doing rail and transit, but they also have branched into aviation, so that when you go to that high school, oh Lydia, you have to come.
That sounds really cool.
When you go to that high school, and we took our team down, the Secretary of Education came with us so that you could just see, and we brought educators from Madison with us so that they could see the partnerships. My counterpart in aviation, Chris Willenberg, who's regional aviation, who's the administrator, regional aviation, Tom Glenn from his staff members went down with us. They literally have flight simulators at that school. I wish that you would see what these 10th, 11th, and 12th graders are doing. So I know you're going to say she's never going to talk about anything else.
No, we need to bring that here, definitely.
Well, let me tell you what happened. I go into this, so we're there, and this is labor management. Everybody's working together on this. We go into, now this is 10th, 11th, and 12th graders. We're doing a working lunch. What they did last year for the summer was that they were very focused on solar and solar power. So what the school program was for that summer was that these kids had to wind up developing, they broke into work teams, they had to develop a product, bring it to market, and all the marketing and everything around it. So we're sitting up there, and while we're eating lunch and they're explaining to us how the curriculum works and all that, 3 groups of students, 10th, 11th, and 12th graders come in to tell us about what their projects were. I can see them now. And I got secretary, all these people sitting around, and we're eating. 3, and these are inner city kids.
Yeah.
I mean, these are not, I keep saying that not to just be stereotypical, but this was not like these were only the 4.0s and the 3.7. Right. These were just plain average kids. I mean, they had some of those 4 points, but average kids. The one group, the first one was the name of their group, they had their little business card, was Suntl, S-U-N-T-L, okay? And what their project was they developed a solar-powered battery charger pack. Now listen, look at me. Look at me. That's what they did. It worked, okay? Because they were all getting themselves ready for August 9th. That was that one. The next group that came in, I'm not kidding you. Now they know all the concepts behind it. The next group that came to talk about theirs, and these were 5 women. This team was all women. They came in, and theirs was a LCKSS, LCKSS. I'll tell you a little story about that in a minute. So what they had was that they had designed what was a solar-powered charging canopy for a bus at an intermodal facility. They had a model with a little solar panel. I'm not kidding you, okay, they had the little model with the little bus that had this little, they were still working on theirs, but it had the actual solar panels that were in a little prototype that was right there. They knew all the stuff behind it, that you had to wind up being able to power it up within 5 minutes because it wouldn't be able to wait longer and all this kind of stuff. So I'm sitting there, and they're giving all the background behind it. Now, these are 10th, 11th, and 12th graders. I got one more to tell you, then I'm going to be quiet.
No.
And so then they sat up there and they said, they went through their whole thing. So then when they finished with their demonstration, we're still eating our little sandwich wraps or whatever. I just asked them, I said, well, could you just please say to me what the LCKSS stood for? Why did I ask? Lucretia, Cassandra.
Oh,
but I told you they were fine. They were their names. Okay, that was that one.
That
Now
was
here's the last one. Now I tell you, Chris Willenberg, the regional aviation administrator, my counterpart, has come with me on this to see this school. The next group that I am not, if I'm lying, I'm flying. Okay, the next group, they had their colonel there. He was their instructor. They were literally, I got to get this right. They had all their pictures. They were totally rewiring at Manassas Regional Airport. Listen to me, okay? They were totally rewiring a Pulsar XJ6 something. Chris knew what it was, okay? And redoing the fuselage. They had all the pictures and everything. And on the end of the day, the kids were gonna wind up doing their stuff so they could fly.
That's amazing. That's
I'm
amazing.
sitting there and I'm saying to myself, Jesus, Jesus, you go, swear to God.
That's
now you talk
amazing.
about what I'm excited about.
Yeah.
Then you walk through everything that they were doing. They even have a program, so get ready. Commonwealth Boston Metroplex is coming our way. They have a program on Saturdays, okay? Now that's the 10th, 11th, and 12th. All of it based on a foundation of a solid STEM foundation, excellent educational preparation, okay? They wind up having internships for the students, cooperatives with business and industry. Like I said, 85% of the kids, they may do it in phases, but they ultimately wind up graduating from college. They have very strong relationships with community colleges and absolutely with champions of industry, okay? Now, the 5th, 6th, and 7th graders. They have a program for the 5th, 6th, and 7th graders on Saturdays. And it's all around, they called it FIRST Robotics, which is in the education world, I'm learning the education world, is actually a real curriculum. But what these kids are really doing, it's like creative play. So they are learning all of the concepts about ohms and, oh, girl, I'm saying girl, please. They make their Legos move, okay?
That's amazing.
But what they're understanding and they're learning are actually all of the foundationally the principles that are really required to make you critically think and be able to actually put all this stuff in application. That building, this generation, okay, to wind up being able to marry up with the investments that we are making in infrastructure, okay? So that what happens is that this is a kind of what I call multiplier effect of the transportation investments that we make, and they are investments. They are investments in the physical side, but they are absolutely investments in this people, in the community, and they help people to be able to fish for themselves, so that's why, very fanatically almost, I have been able to stay in this industry, because at the end of the day, it is about people. It's about people, it's about communities, and it's about opportunity. And so really, it just, so when I look at every one of these billions of dollars, so I go back and I say, I got a governor, God bless him, okay, who said, you know what, actually, when I came here, if it wasn't for Secretary Davey and the governor, I wouldn't even be here.
Right,
okay,
right.
because I was really very candid. I'm not trying to be funny, but I wasn't looking for a job.
Yeah,
okay. Yeah. Said education and transportation were the things that, you know, it's kind of like some things you go to hell and back on.
Yeah.
Okay.
You concentrate on, yeah.
So the focus on innovation, infrastructure, education. 3 legs stool.
That's excellent.
And it's excellent. And it just doesn't.
That's
so
excellent.
all of it.
Yeah.
So, you know, so all of it kinds of, you know, so what do you wind up doing? So we are doing at the authority, we are doing absolutely exciting things. Mm-hmm. I laugh and I tell people every project we have at this point in time, thankfully, because the public has had the confidence mm-hmm. in us. And did we get everything that we wanted out of the way forward? No, we didn't. And even if we had gotten the full way forward was still never going to be an inoculation one time for life, because it wasn't. I mean, look at the numbers. Back in 2010, De La Salle, all the reports, looking at maybe about $20 billion that we were down in terms of infrastructure. Right. Even at its best, the way forward would have been roughly $13 billion. That's on the infrastructure side only. That's not talking about operations and maintenance. But to say that where we are right now, thankfully, has been a significant, I would call it kind of a catalyst, okay, in terms of this investment. What we have to do over on the T side of the house, and all of us, is that we have to make good on what those commitments are. So when you say to me, Beverly, well, what are all the things that are going on? So it's almost like people say, well, do you do this workforce stuff in your sideline? No, it's not a sideline, it's primary. But so what are the things that we got? We got orange and red line cars, and we were very, very clear with everybody. Yeah. We wind up getting this hit. The majority of what winds up taking place on the T is we're going to come right out with state of good repair and those things that make a fundamental difference in terms of people's lives today. So orange and red line cars, as soon as all of it went through October 22nd, that bid was out on the street. Right. We now, and our commitment has been that we will in fact wind up awarding that contract on this administration before many people walk out of the door. Which will be
wonderful, yeah.
Which will be wonderful. So that is, no question, that one we were very, very fortunate, very competitive. It's under evaluation at this point in time, and our commitment is that, by December, we'll in fact make that award. Mm-hmm. Major
you have major investments.
Right Green Line Extension.
The Green Line Extension's great.
Oh, exciting.
Well, lastly, we are ready to wrap up. I just wanted you to touch upon the late night service, how that's going.
Oh my God, late night service, I tell you, is wonderful. Okay, excellent. So right now we're actually over 300,000 riders, okay? People always ask me, they say, well, Beverly, what's the magic number? What's the magic number? There isn't a magic number per se. I mean, you kind of know it when you see it, okay? So when I say that, I take a look at what we would normally be running up into what I would have called the late night service prior to this. And right now, with the numbers that we're running, we are running over 25% of what we would have been running when you say ended up at a 12:30, 1 o'clock in the morning.
Wonderful.
Very. I mean, it's the numbers are good. They're still, you know how everything's so seasonal and ridership kind of shifts, but but the numbers are they're very good. Okay, Cape Flyer, everybody is loving. People asked the question last year. They said, "Well, will the Cape Flyer wind up being successful?" Cape Flyer is being very successful. And that's continuing to move on what we've talked about in terms of water transportation. Mm-hmm. This is a place that loves, a community that loves its water, okay? And so we've got new weekend services that are out that are very, very highly successful. I tell you the honest to God's truth, from the wharf, I mean, we're going out to Georges and all of that, and it's like over 2,000 riders that we wound up having. The Green Line Extension, this is like
huge.
What is not to love about the Green Line Extension? We think, but it wouldn't have been possible for us to advance that project for federal funding if it hadn't been for the way forward, because we can show the feds now that we can operate everything. So that's another big one for us. Bus replacements. So there's just so much that is that's underway, and it's just a privilege to be able to be a part of it.
I can't thank you so much for coming on the show and
You're
sharing
very
this.
welcome.
I'd love to have you on again. There's just so much. There's so much to share in transportation. I just think it's just critical to society and to quality of life improvements.
It is.
And Again, we'd love to have you on. Maybe
you.
in the fall again. I'd love to talk to you more, October, November, after the summer months and see where you're headed in that direction.
Yeah, and then, to talk about some of the ones, like maybe we do something to talk about, like maybe Fairmont Corridor, because all that investment that's taking place over in Fairmont.
Enhancement on that line.
And I'll tell you, the ridership is up on Fairmont like over 70% from when we, so we had
that's
that
wonderful.
pilot.
Yeah,
so
that's perfect.
Great. So anyway,
thank you
so
so
everything's
much.
coming
Thank
together.
you so much for coming on.
Thank you so much
and
for the invitation.
I just want to thank my viewers and my sponsors, Skanska USA Building, Codman Square Development Corporation, and Historical Boston Incorporated for sponsoring this show, and see you all next month.